Hey guys, what's up? Here is Ines and you with the next lecture of this course. So today we're going to talk about lists. Have you ever heard this word? Yeah, I bet you have. So what are we going to do today? Well, first of all, let's think of something else. Let's think of that. Have you ever wondered how you can store two values in one place? Let me show you. Well, if I go to my PyCharm and I say, okay, I have a variable which is num_1 because of the Python case, you know it. Okay, so now num_1 is equal to 5. Okay, I have one variable and it is called num_1 and it is equal to 5, the number 5. But if I want a second, I have to create a second variable which will be called num_2 and I will have 6 in it. Yes, but there are two different variables right now and I want to have 2 or 3 or 5 or doesn't matter how many numbers in one variable. Okay, isn't it just more easy to say, okay, I will have nums and I will say there will be 5 and 6. But this is how I can create a list right now, because right now I just said, okay, I want 5 and 6. But what is that for Python? I should tell him that he needs to understand the type of the variable. So this type is a collection, you know, we can put another values in it until we have a memory. And right now I have to define a collection, and not just a collection, but the list. And how can I do that? Of course, with brackets, square brackets. I will put square bracket here and another at the end. And right now I said to Python, okay, here how we're going to do that. I want 2 or 3 or 5 or doesn't matter how many numbers, and I want them in just one variable. And this variable is called nums. Here I can have as many as I want. As you can see, I have 5 and 6, but it isn't the problem to go here and say, okay, I want, for example, -1 and 5. It's okay for Python. And now we have a variable nums, which holds a lot of numbers. If I go and say print nums, I will see that when I start my PyCharm, that down there I have the result, which is equal to my list, right? But what about if I want to get just one number? And here is the interesting part. Today we're going to talk what is a list at all, how we can use it, and when should we use it. Okay, so now if I go here, I will show you exactly what we're going to do. Besides that, we're going to see what is the list definition in programming. We're going to storing data, a lot of data and a lot of different data, not just numbers in the list, but we can store, for example, a string, and after that a number, and after that a floating point number, just in one variable. Okay, we're going to see that. After that, we are going to see how we can create a list and read a list from a console. We're going to see how we can access the elements one by one. After that, we have a list manipulation, which is going to be very interesting to show you guys, because I personally think that the list is the most creative thing you can ever imagine in programming. Because if you don't have lists, maybe the things you're going to do are very, very, I don't know, in a box. You cannot get out of the box. You cannot get creative if you don't know about the lists. So here we have looping through lists. We're going to see how we can do that, and searching in the lists. Okay, and now we're going to start with the definition and the usage of a list. Well, here we have something which is a list is a collection. Okay, we know it is a collection because here we have a lot of things. As you can see here, we have, for example, 4 numbers in one variable. Okay, so we collect numbers here. So the list is a collection, okay? And after that, we have that It could be ordered, and it could be changed. Well, I'm going to show these things later, because now I want you to focus on that. If we have a list, can we have a duplicated members or values? For example, if I want a list here, like this one, which I have 5 and 6, as you can see, there is no problem to have another number, which is 5. And it's the same as the first one, right? And there isn't a problem. As you can see down there on the console, the 2 5s are there. Okay, so we can have duplicate members here. After that, we're going to see that we have the opportunity to hold strings in a list. Okay, like the numbers, but here, because we know that if we have a string, we need these double quotes here. And if we have an apple and we want it to store in our list, we should say, okay, double quotes, I said apple, after that I say pear, and I say cherry, and isn't a problem for me. And as you can see here, again, in front of everything I have square bracket, and at the end I have again square bracket. Okay, but what about if I want to create an empty list, a list with no one here? Okay, I can say I have nums, but it is an empty list. I just have to put the brackets, the opening one and the closing one. Okay, so now when we solve these things, we should go and see the usage of the list. Okay, we saw that we can store multiple things in the list. We can store numbers, we can store strings, we can store whatever we want. Okay, so now we saw that they can expand and shrink. But what is the expansion of the list? Well, if you go here and say, okay, I have just 3 numbers. The first one is 1, the second is 2, and the third is 3. And if I go there, I can say, okay, print the nums. And another thing I can do here is say, okay, print not the elements here, the numbers in this case, print their count. Okay, if I go here, I can say length. This is a built-in function in Python, which returns the result of the count of elements in the list. So here I have 3 numbers, so I have 3 for length of my list. And if I start, you can see here that I have 3, which is the count of the numbers. When I go down there and say, okay, but I want to add something else in this list. I want to add another number, which will be, for example, 15. I can say, okay, nums, and I can use a dot, and this dot will give me a lot of opportunities here. I can use something like append. If you try to translate this word, you will see that append is something like add, right? It's the same. So I can go here and say append. And when I do that, you'll see that it is expecting an object. In my case, I will give to the list the number 15. So I say 15 and tab. And if I go down there and copy this line and paste it here, again for the length of the list, you will see that the list will be, the first one will be with 3, because here I have just 3 elements, right? 3 numbers, and I have 3. And after that, I append another one, which is 15, and the length is 4. This is how the list can expand. Okay, and after that, we will see that also we can use lists as quiz and stacks, but it's very early to see these structures because they are very important, but we should just focus on one thing if we want to be effective in our learning. So right now we're going to talk just about lists, but keep in mind that they're very important, because when you go and want to understand another collections, right, like set, like dictionaries, and so on and so on, you're going to need the understanding of how collections work, and this is how with lists you're going to get this thought. Okay, so now how we can store data in our lists. As you can see, we can store a lot of things in a list. We can store numbers, okay, we can store strings, objects, other lists, mixed data, and so on. Okay, let me show you one by one. Okay, we saw the numbers and we saw the strings, but we haven't seen the objects, and we aren't gonna see that because we haven't learned it yet. But we can see other lists, how a list could be included in a list. What? Yeah, we can do that. If we go to PyCharm and say something like first list is equal to, let's say, numbers 1 and 2. Okay, I say 1 and 2. This is my first list, okay, with 2 elements, with the length of 2. If I go down there and say, okay, I want a second list, which will be with 3 and 4. Now I want to add, I want to append in my list not just a number, but another list. Can I do that? Yes, of course. Why? Because if you say first list dot append, you will see that here append says, okay, you can append object. As you know, in Python, anything is object. So everything is object. Numbers are objects, string are objects, everything basically is an object. So now if I go here and say append and I say second list, I will see that if I go and say print first list and start my PyCharm, I will see here that I have one big list, a parent list, and a child list, which is of 3 and 4. And this is called matrix, by the way. But for now, it is very useful just to know that lists can store multiple things, not just numbers, but also other lists or dictionaries or every kind of object. And the interesting things here is if I go here and say first list dot append and say, oh, okay, I want the string, which is hello, and I start it again, there's no problem. I can hold in one list, I can hold a number, another number, a list, and a string, and there is no problem. In one place, I can hold a lot of different types. Okay, so here how we saw the mixed data and other lists in a list. Okay, now we're going to see another interesting things about lists, but no, I want you guys to show you something interesting. Okay, imagine something like that. We are going to have one list with 4 elements, 1, 2, 5, and -1, for example. Okay, now I want to get just one number and I want to get 5. How I'm going to achieve that? It is very interesting because lists are collections, and because it is a collection, it should have something like ordering of the elements. But do not imagine that we're going to sort the list right now. We're just going to imagine how the things are ordered in every one, in every list, basically. So now we have 1, okay, 2, 5, and -1. These things here doesn't matter if they are numbers or strings, are called elements, okay? They're elements. But imagine that here we have something like rows. for every number. And here always we have 0. Here we have 1, 2, and 3. Why we have 3? Because we start from 0. We always start from 0. And these things here are called indexes, right? And if I want to get a number, I should get it by its index. So right now, if I say, okay, I want to get the number 5 from this list, how can I achieve that? By its index. What is the index of number of element 5? It is 2. Okay, let me try to get it. If I go down here and say print, but how can I achieve that? Okay, I want from my list, this list, I want to get a number. So I say the list I want to get a number from. And after that, I need the very same syntax we used for creating the list in the first place. We need this square bracket, and at the end we have another one, which is closing. Okay, so now I can say the same thing, opening and closing square brackets. And here I have to say the number of the index. And for example, if I want to get 5, I have to say index 2, right? And if I start, I will see that on the console, it is number 5 here. Okay, cool. So, you tried. How you can get the number -1? Yes, of course, I should say index 3. Okay, I will start and it will give me -1. But what about if I say, okay, give me the number of index 4? Is that possible? If I go here and again try to imagine the indexes above, I will see that I have 0 every time starting from 0, 1, 2, and 3, right? Okay, but I want the number, the element of index 4, but I don't have this one. So, what are you expecting here right now? Yes, it would be an error. And if I start, I will see here a very, very common mistake, and it is called index error in Python, or index out of range exception. Because when I try to get an element from here, and I don't have so much indexes, I will get, of course, index out of range exception, because I am out of the range of the list. Okay, but what about if I want to say, okay, I want an index -1, and you say now that it is going to create another exception, which will be the same, index out of range exception, because I just tell you that here we start always from 0, but that was from left to right. Okay, and if I try here to say -1, see what will happen. It will give me -1. And you're asking yourself right now, okay, is this because the index is -1 and it will return me -1? I don't know why. No, because if I go and write -2, it will return 5. Okay, so now, if you know that we have 5 here, what is the logic of it? If I imagine one more time these rows here, and this time I want to see the array from right to left, I will see that here will be an index called -1. Here will be an index called -2. Here will be -3, and here will be -4. Okay, so in Python you have 2 ways to get the index, from left to right, which is from 0 to the length of the list -1. And here I'm going to explain what exactly I have said. You always, if you start from left to right, we have always start from 0, and we will start from 0 here. And we know that we have 1, 2, and 3. And I said that every time the indexes are the highest one is the length of the list minus 1. So, if you know that, if we have a length of the list, which is the numbers of elements in the list, here we have 1 element, 2 elements, 3 elements, 4 elements. So, the length of the list is 4, right? Okay, I have 4. And as said that, the last index always is the length of the list minus 1. So, if I extract from 4 1, I will get 3, which is the last index here in my list, as you can see, right? Okay, so now, if I say minus 3, for example, I will get 2. Okay? Very cool, right? Okay, so now, what can we do right now? Okay, but what if I want to get from the first element, from here, to, let's say, 5? Just get from here to here. Okay, once again, imagine the walls. And you will see that we have indexes 0, 1, and 2, right? We have it. And right now, I want from 0 to index 2, right? But if I go and write from 0, I can express myself 2 with this syntax, okay? So from 0 to, you will say 2, okay? But is that the correct solution? How do you think? Think of the range function. How range function works, okay? It takes first argument and the last argument. And if I say in range function, for example, if I say range from 1 to 10, for example, and after that I say print these numbers, I will get the numbers from 1 till 9, right? So here, if I want from 0 to the second index, what will I get? Okay, let's see. Yes, I will see that I have just 0 and 1 because this number isn't included. So if I want to get from 0 to 5, so from 0 index here to second index, and I want the numbers 1, 2, and 5, I'll have to say that here I want to be to index 3. And if I start it, I will get my exact result here, okay? But you know that if I use the range function, I can say, okay, my range is just that. And I will again have the numbers, but this time from 0, because by default it is from 0 to 9, right? Because it is this argument minus 1. Okay, so now, how can I achieve that again here with this slicing? Well, I can just remove 0 index. And if I start it again, I will have the very same result here, from 0 index to the second one. Okay, but what about if I just delete this one? I will see that I will get the list from the beginning till the end. And if I start it, I will see that I have my whole list. Here I have from 1 to minus 1, all numbers included, and here it is the same. But here you will ask, okay, but we saw that we can use minus indexes. Okay, how can I achieve that? Well, I can say from minus 1 till minus 3, for example. What will I get? Think, for example. Let's imagine again this was. Okay, so now we know that we have minus 1, the starting one. And we want to get minus 2 and minus 3. So again, we want 3 numbers, but this time from right to left, which means I want minus 1, 5, and 2. But I know how here things are handled. So if I start, I will see that I will get nothing. Why is that? Why do you think? Yes, okay, let me try it with another one. to see how it is working, because it takes time to see how the things are working, and you just have to try things and try to explain it. Okay, I will explain in a second, but right now focus on what I have been doing so far. So, okay, if I say I want a start from -1 till, for example, 2, what will happen now? Again, nothing, okay? But if I say from -1 to, for example, -2 or -54 or whatever, again, I will get an empty list, okay? So right now, here you have something like a task. You have to think, why is that happening? I'll explain it, but you have to think, okay, if I start from -1, can I reach -3? Because in a range function, think with range function. In a range function, if I say range from -3 till -1, and that's it, that's all. Will I have something here? No, I won't. So how we solve this problem in the range function? We say third parameter, which will be, for example, -1. Okay, so now how can I solve this one? You have to think of that, and maybe in 10 minutes I will ask you again and we will solve it together. Okay, another thing I wanted to show you right now is that if I want to get numbers from 1 to, for example, 50, I don't have this kind of index, I don't have index 50, what will happen? You will say index out of range, but no. If I start it, I will see that I will just have from the first index, which is element 2 right here, and I will get till -1, which is the last one. And it doesn't matter how much I write here. I can write 150, for example, it will work, because every time I ask for a value which is higher than the indexes, this function just stop and say, okay, you have from 0 index to 3 indexes, from 0 to 3, so you're going to receive just these results and nothing more, which is very safe, by the way. Okay, so now let's see what we have for today, but in very interesting examples right now. Okay, we saw how we can create a list, and again I want to show you these square brackets. It isn't hard right now for you to remember that, but when we start talking about dictionaries and sets and tuples and another collections in Python, you will see that the brackets matter. So right now, just remember, just focus on that. Here, lists we have, and these lists are with square brackets. Okay, now we have list function, but it is very interesting to see what we can do with it, and I will show you in a minute. Here we again how we can create an empty list. So we have two options. One is just to use square brackets and nothing else, nothing between them, or using just the built-in function called list. And here we can have another thing which, in my opinion, is the most interesting one in this lecture. Okay, if you see that we have some text here, and it is a string, and this string contains spaces, and we want just to have these A, B, and C and D letters in a list with rows and indexes above. How we can achieve that? Well, here we have a function called split. What does this function do? Well, if I want to split my list, I have to use something. In this case, I will use split function. And here I can say, okay, in this split function, I will split my elements by space, right? Because I want to remove this spaces here. And I can achieve that with split. And this split function returns a list. Well, how can we see that? If we have my text here, and I say that the same example, I have A space B space C space D, and I want to print the type of my text, so I can use the built-in function type. And here I can say my text. If I start, I will see that my text is class string. Okay, it is of type string, which is normal. We all know that. But if I go and say, okay, my text, my list, and I say my list is equal to my text dot split, and here I say by space, the single, I will see that if I say print and the type of the variable my list will be list. Here it is. The first one is from this print, which is from my text variable, and here we have class list, which is from my list, and we all know that now if we apply the split function to a string, it will return a list of elements. And how can I see the elements? Well, I can remove the type and I can start it again, and I will see here that I have class string, which is again from this print, and I'm just going to remove that because I don't want to mess the things up. Okay, so here I have my list, which is a list, but because it is a list of strings, we see how every element have quotes, right? Okay, and this is very interesting. And right now, if I say, okay, I want to receive from the console input, which should be split by space, and I have to see the result as a list, what can I do? Okay, I will go and say my data will be equal to input, right? We all know that the input function returns a string, right? So if I can say to string dot split, well, here I can do the very same thing, and I will set those split by space, and after that I will say, okay, print the data. And if I start right now and say hello and space soft tuning, I will see that here I have a list with the length of 2, with 2 elements, and every element in this list is string. The first one is hello, and the second one is soft tuning. Okay, very powerful function, by the way. And if you want to split by, I don't know, pipes, you can also do that. You will say here not by space but by pipe. And if I go and start and say, okay, hello and pipe soft tuning, again I will have my result. But if I say here again, I start and say, okay, A space pipe B, I will get A and space because I said always split just by pipe. And when split function get this string and say, okay, I have to remove the pipe, it will remove just the pipe, but here we have a space, right? And we will have A space, and after that we will have B in our list as strings. And the list will be of 2 elements with the length of 2 and from 0 to 1 indexes. Okay, now we can see that here we have a very interesting function called join. Well, right now we so far saw how we can, for example, split things like strings, and we can receive a list. But what if, imagine that I want to have here a simple list called numbers, and here I have numbers 1, 5 and -3. Okay, and now I want to print that list, and if I just say print numbers, it will get the exact same result. But I want to print the list without these square brackets and without the spaces and so on. I want to be elements to be joined by, for example, I don't know, a single space, and that's all. Well, there are two different ways to achieve that. The first one is the Pythonic way, and here I have to say an asterisk. When I apply this in front of the list, I will get exactly what I want. Here I have just the numbers without the square brackets, and they are just joined by single space. But here is another option to do the same thing. Well, if I go here and say, okay, what I want to be my element split apart? Well, I want to be joined is the right term, by space. Okay, so now I can say this is string, so I can join string between elements of the list, right? And I will say join it, which is the collection right now I want to be joined. Well, I want to be this one, so I will say in the join function numbers. And if I start it, I will see that this gives me an error. And the error is sequence expected string instance int found. Okay, so now we have to think. String join, where's on string, right? This space right here. But we want to apply numbers with this join function on the string, which is not possible according to Python. Okay, so now we have to think of a way how we can achieve that we want from list of numbers, to get a list from strings. How we can do that? Well, we can say before the join, we will say that we will have numbers as list, or just number lists, or list. Okay, and here I have to say, okay, here is a function called map. And if I use map, I have to say two things here. First one is the function I want to apply on every element in the list. Okay, so what I have to do on every element in my list? I have to cast it from int to string, right? So now I have to use this built-in function called string. But here I have just to say the reference, so I will use str. I'll explain you guys in the next lecture what exactly the reference is, but right now just remember that if I want to use string function, I don't have to call it right like that, okay? I just have to use it without this one. So I will delete that and say, okay, I want to map every element to string. But how can I achieve that? To take, I don't know, these numbers and apply it to strings. Well, this is the magic of the map function. And right now I have to say which is the collection I want to work with. And here the collection is numbers. And here I have a collection numbers, which is a collection from integer numbers. And I want to map every element of this collection to string and get the result in numbers list. And I will also say that numbers as strings. Okay, and right now if I get this variable and put it in the join function, I will see that I have no error here and it is working. And I don't have, every time I want to map something from one collection to another type or map it with another function and something like that. To do it in a new variable, I just have to say, okay, I want this, and here I have to put this, delete this one. And as you know, the function in Python works from inside to outside. So if I have map here and join here and print here, what is the order of executing these functions? Well, from inside to outside. So the first one here will be map. After that will be the join function, and after that will be the print function. Right? Okay. So it's something like bubbling. And right now, I suggest you guys to have a break. And after the break, we're going to explain this situation which was from -1 to -3, right? In this break, please research it and try understand how it is working. And after the break, I will show you exactly how we can achieve that and why it isn't working right now, and how we can improve that and make it work. Okay? Okay, do you succeed? Did you succeed to find a solution for our problem earlier? Okay, let me show you once again. If I have this list, let's say with 4 elements and the other one will be 10, for example, I want here to take the elements from right to left, from 10 to 5. Okay, I know that if I want to get it from right to left, I have to use minus index. So here I have -1, here I have -2 and -3. Okay, so far so good. We have done something like numbers from -1 to -3, but it isn't working. Why? Because if I start it, I will see an empty list, which isn't our case right here. But I told you, think of range function. And if we say we want for loop, which is for num in range, for example, from 1 to 10, it's normal. But if I want to from 10 to 1, I have to say the third parameter, which is -1, which is the step in this case, and I will say print num, and this will give me, of course, the numbers from 10 to 2. Okay, and here I have the very same case. I have to say the step if the indexes are minus. So here I have to say, okay, with step of -1. And here we go again. If I have -1, -2, and -3, we will get the numbers from 10 to 5. Let's see. If I start, I will see that here I have just the numbers. And I will see that I have from 10 to -3. And this is why, because I have -1, -2, and -3. And once again, if I want to include this one, I have to say -4, right? And if I say -4, it will give me 3 numbers. As you can see down here, it is working right now. What if I say -40? Well, it will work the same as the previous problem, which was from 1 to 50, I believe, I don't know. And here it is, we just get from the index, which is -1, in this case, the last number, to the first one. Okay, and now I want to show you what will happen if I say -2. What do you think? Well, you're right. We will get the numbers -10, which is the first one. We will skip this one because the step is -2, and we will get 5. And here we have a list of 10 and 5. Okay, and now, if I want to do the exact same thing but from left to right, I will say from 0 to, I don't know, let's say 3, and I want 2. What will happen right now? Well, if I start, I will see that I have from 0, which is element 1, with number 1, and index 0, and I want 2, 3. So here is 1, 2, and 3. And I know that 3 is not included, so it doesn't matter right now because the step is 2, and I will get 1 and -3. Cool. Okay, this is basically the most used case in Python because it's very useful and it's very comfortable to use list slicing. And you have to give it a shot to understand it. Just create your own list with 5 or 6 elements and try to get from this one to this one and see how it is working. Try it by yourself and you will see the common mistakes which maybe you're going to do. And after that, you're going to learn how exactly the slicing works, and you have the opportunity to use it very often, and it will be good for you because see how small it is, but how powerful it is, right? And right now, I want you guys to talk about something else, which is called list manipulation. Here we see some features of list manipulation, which was append function. If I want to append something in my list, I will say mylist.append 5, for example, and it will give me another number to my list, which will be 5. Okay, but if I want to remove something, well, I have to use the remove function. And let me show you once again in PyCharm. If I go here and say, okay, I want to say numbers.remove, and here I have to say remove object. What is the difference between remove, pop, and so on? It is what is taking as an argument. Because right here we have remove function and it says you should put the object here you want to remove. So if I go and say, okay, remove, let's say I want to remove 5, well, I will say 5. And if I print the number list, I will see that here I have 1, I don't have any more 5, -3, and 10, and that's all. But what if I say, okay, I want to remove 11? As you can see, 11 is not in our list. And if I start PyCharm, you will see that I will get the error that list remove, which is my function which throws the error, Higgs is not in the list. And this is the case. I want to show how you can handle that, because it's very important to know that conditional statements, ifs, should be used very, very carefully. And here we can say something like, if 11 is in numbers, I want to remove it. Well, I will do that. And is in wouldn't work, because I said that way, but it doesn't mean I should write it exactly the same way. So 11 in numbers. This is a question. In if we have always a question, if something is valid or not. If it is valid, do something. If it isn't, you have maybe else statement and it will go in the else statement. But if you don't have it, it will do basically nothing else. So here we have, if we have 11 in our list, I want to remove it. If I don't have 11, I will not remove it. And right now, if I start, and I will see that my list is here. I don't have an error anymore. And 11 was not in my list, so I haven't removed it. But if I say, okay, I have 11, and if I start, I will see right now 11 was removed from the list. Here it is in the list, so I want to remove it, and after that I want to print it, right? Okay. And right now we can see that here we have a problem, a curse problem, which is for curses. And here we have, okay, we receive from the console a single number called n. Okay, we have to read on the next n lines curses names and adds them to a list. Okay, and after that we should print the list. Let's do that. Okay, we know that we will receive the n from the console, but the n is number, right? So I have to parse it int from input. Cool. Right now I have n. And for the next n lines, I have to read curses names. Okay, so now I have to make my code to do something n times, right? So what should I use right now? Yes, again, it is a for loop. So for iteration in range, yes, in range from 0 to n. Okay, right now I want you to ask a question here. What if I say from 1 to n? Yeah, I have to say +1. But in this case, if I say from 0 to n, it will be exactly n times. So now I have to read curse names. Okay, so I will say name, current name, is equal to input y, because names are strings, right? So I will leave it like that. And right now I have to store this whole information in one variable. And here I have to use list. So I will say curse name, curses names. Okay. And it is a good practice, by the way, to describe your variables. So if you have a variable which is a list, you have to say underscore list at the end of the name of the variable. Okay, so now I have what? An empty list. Okay, we know two ways of creating an empty list. This is the first one, and the second one is using the built-in function which is called list. Okay, I prefer the first one, so I will say okay, just square brackets. Right now I have to put every current name in the list. How I put things in a list, you know it already. Yes, it is with append function, right? So if I say current, no current, but courses names, list dot append, I want to append the current name, right? And I will say current name. And at the end of the program, when I have finished reading names, I have to print all courses, right? So what should I do? I should write print, and after that I should say the name of the variable which holds all of the names of the courses. And right now I'll see that if I have 2 and pbpython and pfpython, I will see if I start my console that here it awaits me to put a number. So I will say 2, and after that I will say pbpython, and after that I will say pfpython. And I will see that I have a list of 2 strings, right? 2 courses. The first one is this one, and the second one is this one. Well, we solve the problem, right? And after that, maybe, here you have the solution, by the way, and you can see it one more time. Here we should see how we can look through lists. And this is a very interesting case. And you know it already, but you don't think that you know it. Okay, so now if I say I will have names list, and I will say here I have Python, C#, string C#, and I will have, for example, JS, which stands for JavaScript. Okay, so now I have to see how I can print every element in the list on a separate row. Cool? Right. So how can I do that? I can use a for loop, which is a for loop for collections. And how I can achieve that? Well, like the other for, I should say for, the keyword for. After that, I say for what? And I want for every name. So for name in, but not in range, but just in the collection. So my collection in this case is called names list. So right now I have to say names list. And after that, I have to say, okay, on a separate row. So I will say print name. So for every row, print name. And if I start, I will see that I have on the first row Python, on the second row C#, and on the third one JavaScript. That's cool, but what if I want to use the regular for loop with the range function? Well, I can do that, but what should I do here? So now I know that I have to use a range, and the range function receives numbers, right? Receives numbers. So I should say a range here, but for a moment, think of the rows. If I say here is a row and here is a row, and I have 0, 1, and 2, my length is 3. So if I have range from somewhere to somewhere, and it should be numbers, so what should I use? Yes, indexes. So right now I have to start from 0 to, but here is the interesting part. Imagine that I don't know how many elements are in the list. So if I know, I will say, okay, from the 0 index to, in this case, 3. Why? Because if I go here, I will see that every time range function is n minus 1, right? Here, for example, I have 1, 2, 3. But I have 0, 1, and 2. And if I write 2, it will give me just Python and C#, right? So right now I'm writing 3. Okay, I will delete that. And right now I have a range. And this isn't a name. This is an index for every index in range from 0 to 3. So I will say this is the index. And right now, if I write just names list, I will print n times the whole list. Let me try it. You will see that I have printed the list, right? But I want the element I am currently on in it. So I will say, okay, give me the element on the index I'm on right now. And if I start, I will see that I'll have the same result as before. Here it will be Python, C#, and JavaScript, right? But what if I don't know the length of this list? I don't know, there are 3 elements, so the length is 3, and so on, and so on. And the indexes are till 2. What should I do right now? Well, I have to use something more dynamic. And I know that if I call the built-in function called length, I will receive the number of the elements, right? And in this case, I will receive 3. Exactly what I need here, right? And if I go and say, okay, the length of this collection, which in my case is names list, and if I start, I will get the same result. So if you want to iterate through indices of a collection, you will need to do from 0 to the length of the collection. And because the range function is still -1, you should leave it like so. And of course, if you want, you can remove the first parameter because by default, it is working from 0. So if I start it, I will see that I have the same result. But the more easier way to achieve the same thing here is to iterate through the elements in the collection. So how I iterate through the elements? Well, I will remove this range and I will just say, okay, for name, for element, you can call it whatever you like. And after that, I want to be in this collection. Right now, I don't have to use indexes. And if I print just the element, I will receive the exact same result. Here it is, right? And this was very important. So again, you should try it by yourself and see what isn't working. And again, try to understand how range function is working, how list slicing is working, and so on. And right now, we'll see that we can iterate through loops with while loop. Well, every time I see a while, I'm very happy about it because I think that while is more comfortable for me. And when you start learning new things, you notice that while loop will be more suitable for your problems, right? So let's try to solve this problem. Here we have to loop through list with while. And every time we want to remove an element. This time we will use pop function. But before we start solving this problem, I want you guys to show you the difference between two functions. Well, I will say that I have this name list, and for example, I will say name list dot remove, and if I want to remove C#, I will just say okay, remove C#, and you know that it is going to work. And if I print names list and start the console, I will see the result without the C# because I removed that. Okay, but what if I want to use pop? Well, the pop function, it will tell you that you should give this function an index, not the actual object. So here, if I want to remove C#, I could not say, okay, I want to pop C#, right? It's very obvious. I cannot do that. So I should give the index of element, which is C#. In my case, this index would be, yes, it will be 1. And if I imagine this was again, I will see I have 0, 1, and 2, and it is in index 1. So I will say, okay, pop 1, and if I start, I will see that C# isn't there. Okay, so now when you know the difference, let's see what we have in this white. You'll see that here we have to iterate with while loop. And if we have a list, animal list, we'll see that we have cat, fish, dog, cat, and fish, right? And here I will say that while the length of my list is greater than 0, which means that right now on the first iteration, I have 1, 2, and 3 elements, right? 3 is greater than 0, so it is valid statement, and I will continue looping in the while loop. So right now I have to print the element on the first position, which is index 1, and I will print in this case dog, right? And after that I have to pop the element I have just printed. So if I pop the element at the position 0, that means I will print dog, and after that I will remove dog, right? And the length of the list will be exactly 2, but in this case 2 is greater than 0, so once again I can do that. I can do exactly the same thing, but which is the element of the first position right now? When I remove something, it doesn't matter where it is on the list. But if it has a sequence of elements or a single element after it, they will be shift to the left. No? Okay, so right now, if I print the first element, this time the first element will be cat. Okay, so now I'm going to print cat, and after that I'm going to pop it from the list, because again I pop the element at 0 index, and after that I will see that the length of the list is 1, so 1 is greater than 0, and once again I will do the same thing. And right now the first element is fish, because when I removed dog, the cat was the first element, but after that I removed cat, so the fish, right now fish is the first element in my list. And I have to say, okay, print my list 0, which means print the element at the first position, and the element at the first position right now is fish, so I'm going to print fish on the console, and after that I'm going to remove that. But when I say length of an empty list, of course, the length, the count of the elements in an empty list is 0, right? So 0 isn't greater than 0, and I should stop looping through this loop. And if I want to see how it is working, I can say, okay, let's take that and paste it in our PyCharm. I will say, okay, I want a breakpoint here, right? And I want to, for the first time, I want to start it and see if it's working. Yeah, it's working. And it is on the same line. Why? Because I have used here a parameter which is and after that I have these double quotes, and between them I have space, which means stay on the same line, but after you have printed what you have to print, just paste a space. And if I put here, I don't know, whatever, pipe, for example, it will be separated by pipe. And right now I will see that it is working. So if I start here a debugger, I will see that we're like waiting. It is a little bit slow today. Okay, so now I will see that I have my list, which is there, cat and fish. And if I expand it, I will see here that I have len, which is 3. It's normal, right? I have 1, 2, and 3 elements right now. And here it is true, because I have 3 is greater than 0. If I go 1 down there, I will see that on the console, I will have my first print right now. And after that, I have to pop the element. Look carefully. Right now I have 3. And right now I'm going to pop the first one. See what will happen. The first one is popped. So right now just with two elements, which are cat and fish. And the cat is on the first position, which means index 0 index. And here we have 1. And right now, if I check length here is 2. And if I go down there, I will see that I have to print something, right, on the console. And right now, terminal, oops, okay, and right now I will see that I will pop another element from here, which will be again the first one, but once again, the first one, it is already a cat. So if I pop it, I will see that cat isn't there. And I will see that the fish is the first one. And right now I will go once again down there, and I will see that the length is 1, but when I pop the last element, the length of the list will be 0, right? So 0 isn't greater than 0, and you should stop looping through the loop. So if I go here, the program is with exit code null 0, so I will see that here I have my 3 elements that I have just printed. Okay, so now we have a problem to solve right now, and this problem is very interesting. Let's see it closely and carefully. You will be given a number n. Okay, that's the previous one. On the next n lines, you will have to receive integers, n integers. Okay, it's like the previous one. Create and print 2 lists. Okay, one with all the positive numbers, including 0, and one with all negatives. Okay, finally, we should format our output, and it should look something like this. We should say count of the positive, which is count of the positive list, and sum of negative. Okay, so right now we need 2 lists, right? One for the positive and one for the negatives. So if I go in PyCharm, I will first say that I will receive an n, which is an integer, and I will say it will be from the input, from the console. Okay, right now I have to make my code read n times numbers. So for number for iteration, this is an iteration. For iteration in range from 0 to n, and I will just say n here, I will see that I have to read a number. Number is equal to int from input, right? But the number should be integer or float. Receive integers, okay, it is an integer number. And right now I have to decide if the number is positive or it isn't. So I have to create 2 variables. One is positive numbers list, which is empty for now, and the other variable would be negative numbers list again, which will be empty. So right now I have to check if the element is positive. And once again, the presentation said to us that we have to keep in mind that here we have positive numbers including zeros. 0. So if I go here, I have to check if the number I've just read from the console is greater than or equal to 0. I have to put it in the positive list, right? So positive number list dot append. What? I have to append the number, right? But what if I have another case? So the another case is else, where I have negative numbers list dot append with again the number, and I have to say down there that I have to say the count of positive numbers, not the list, but the count. So if I go here, how can I achieve the count of the list? You know it already. Yes, it is with the length built-in function. So I will say print, and here I want to copy that because, in my opinion, it is a bit easier to do that. And how can I format a string? Again, with f in front of the string. And I will say, okay, here I have to have count of positive numbers. So here I have to say length, built-in function of positive number list. Cool. And after that, I have to say another print function, which will be formatted again, a formatted string again. And here I have to say sum of negatives, the sum. This is very interesting because I haven't showed you guys how we can achieve that. But when you know that we can use this built-in function, which gives us a length, can you think of a name of a function which can return the sum of all elements in the list? Yeah, it is called sum, right? So if I write here sum, you'll see that it is a built-in function which receives an iterable. By the way, every list is iterable, but once again, I will explain that in details in the next lectures. So keep in mind that list is iterable, but it doesn't matter if you understand what exactly an iterable object is. If you want, you can check it on Google and you can try understand it, but don't worry, I will explain it in the next lectures. I don't know exactly when it would be. So right now I have to go back to the sum and say, okay, the sum built-in function and it takes iterable. I know that the list is iterable. So a list is iterable, so I have to say, okay, negative numbers list. I have to remove that. And this one. Okay, so right now, I think I am ready to test it. Okay, so if I say 1, 2, and 3, these numbers are all positive, right? And 0. So I have to have the result, count of positive numbers should be 4, and sum of negatives, we will see. How do you think? What it's going to be? It is an empty list. So if I sum an empty list, an elements from an empty list, I will get what? Yeah, 0. So if I start but, I will see that here I have invalid for int with base 10. Once again, it is very important how I should handle my input. And here I will see that I have to put an n, and on every line I have to put numbers, right? So let me try it once again. So right now I have to say how many elements I'm expecting, right? So I will say I'm expecting, for example, 4 elements. The first one will be 1, the second one will be 2, the third one will be 3, and the fourth one will be 0. Okay, so right now I will have count of positive numbers is 4, exactly as I told, and sum of negatives number will be 0. Okay, right now let's test it with all negative numbers. So I will say 2 elements, -1 and -2. And here we see that the count of positive is 0 because we don't have any positive numbers in our list, which is called positive numbers list. And we have 2 numbers which are -1 and -2, and the sum of these numbers is -3. So I get the result -3. Cool. That is for this problem, and you have the solution here, but it's not the whole solution. So once again, I want to go through this solution to be sure that you guys have in mind how the things are working. So right now I have to receive n, right? This is the number of elements I will receive. So right now I will need 2 lists, one for the positives and one for the negatives. And right now I will start iterating. And for every iteration from 0 to n, I will read a number from a console. And I will check if the number is positive or equal to 0, I will append the number to my positive numbers list. But in other case, I will put the number in my negative numbers list because the number will be, of course, negative. And after that, I have to print the count of the numbers, and I know that it will happen with the length built-in function. And once again, I have to use another built-in function for the second row, which says the sum of negatives, and I will use sum and give the list which is filled with the negative number, and I will get the result. Another way to solve this problem, this row, is to loop through all the elements. But here we can say that we have a variable called sum of negatives, and it will be 0. And I have to say for every element in negative list, I will use sum of negatives plus equal element. And right now, if I comment this line and try use once again print, but this time I'm not going to use this sum function, but just use my custom variable, I will see that if I try it again with two elements, which will be -1 and -2, I will get -3 again. But as you can see, we have a comfortable way to achieve that, and we do not need this for loop and this custom variable, because it's a lot easier for us just to use this built-in function called sum and give the list we want the sum of the list of elements in the list. So right now we have to learn how to search for element in a list. And this is very useful. You know that already. You know that you can find if something is in the list or it isn't with, for example, this 11 number. If I say if 11 is in my list, I will get the answer yes or no. In this case, true or false, right? But here we have another example, which is with 3. If I have my list, which is from 1 to 4, I will see that I have if 3 in my list. So if I have 3, in this case I have it, so the answer is positive, yes, I have it, it's true, I will get that line. The number 3 is in the list. So I can use this in keyword in if-else statement to check if something in the list or it isn't. Once again, I can check if something isn't in the list. How can I achieve that? Well, with not in keywords. So if I check here, I have 1, 2, 3, and 4, right? And I'm asking 5 is not in my list, right? And the answer is yes, because 5 isn't in the list. And I will get that the number 5 is not in the list. Okay? And right now we have a problem, and we have to search. And we have to receive a number n and a word. On the next 10 lines, you'll be given some strings, okay? Add them in a list and print them. Then filter out only the strings that contain the given word and print the list again. Okay, so line by line. The first one is to CNN, which is an integer and input. And we know already how to solve this for every line. So for a line, for every line in a range, let's say from 0 to n, can leave it like that. I will say that I have a current string, which is from input. But I have a, yes, here I have to receive a word. So I have n and I have to receive a word. Maybe the word I'm going to search. I don't know. We will see that. Okay, so right now I'm writing word is from input. For every one in n, I have to read the current string and append it to list. So I will need the list, of course. So here it is what's list, which is an empty list. And right now, when I receive a word, I have to append in it. So word list.append const string, right? And right now, I have to check, what should I have to check? Filter out only the strings that contains the given word and print the list again. Okay, so right now, how we can achieve that? We should have another list, which is called filtered words list again at the end, which is empty for now. And if I go and say, okay, I have append all elements in my list. And for every element in my words list, I have to check if word, this word above, right? If word is in my element, I have to append it to the filtered words list. Dot append word. If it isn't, I do not want to append it, so I should leave it like that. And at the end, I have to print my list with the filtered words. So filtered words list. And right now I have to think of a case to test it, right? Well, let me see that I will have two elements, right? The word I'm searching will be Python. And I will say the first word would be JavaScript. And the second word would be Python. Yes, I have this one. And right now let's test it with another case, which is case sensitive. Let's see if we can achieve that. Okay, if we have two elements, JS, and the second one is Python with capital T, and I'm searching for JS with capital J and capital S. If I write JS, would it that work? Let's see. No. Why? Because as you know, Python is case sensitive. So if I ask Python, hey Python, if JS is equal to JS, it will tell me that it isn't. Why? Because JS is with a different ASCII value, and this J is with a different ASCII value again. So let us try something else. If I say that I have two elements and the word I'm searching is uni, and if I try to say soft uni, and once again soft uni but with capital U, what should I get? Yes, I will find an uni here, but I have to think of something like that, because here I have to receive soft uni, not just the uni, right? How can I do that? Well, I see that my mistake is somewhere from here. Why? Because I say, if I have the word I'm searching in the element right now, so if I have a list from soft uni and soft uni, and I'm looping through the list and I'm seeing that the first word is soft uni, I'll get the result is uni and the word soft uni. It will tell me that it is. But I append here the word. I don't want to append the word. I want to append the element. So what should I delete? Yes, I should delete the word and say, okay, I want to append the element. And if I try the exact same input, start the PyCharm and say, okay, soft uni, yes, I will get the result soft uni right now. Okay, so here it is how I can search for a word or a part of a word in an element in the list. Okay, so here we have another problem, which is called numbers filter, right? And we will receive a single number n. On the next n lines, you will receive integers, okay? And after that, you will be given one of the following comments, okay, even, odd, negative, or positive. Cool. Filter all the numbers that fit in the category. 0 counts as a positive and even. Okay, and we should print the result. Okay, right now I'm suggesting to have a break, and after that we're going to solve this problem. Meanwhile, you have to think of a solution. How many lists you can see in this problem? How we can achieve that? Can we reuse a solution from the previous problems? And so on and so on. Okay, I will see you in a few minutes and we will solve this problem, right? Okay. Okay, after the break, back to the problem. As you can see here, we have to reuse some lines of code from the previous problems. So right now we once again have this n. After that we have n lines receiving integers. After that we will have to receive a comment. Okay, till here we have to solve these lines. Right now we have to write that we will receive an n. We have it. We will not receive a word this time, so I'm going to delete that, and basically I'll just live with one for loop, which will say that for every line I have to read integers. So current number is equal to input function from the console, and right now maybe I have to append these numbers in a list, right? Yeah. Okay, I have to append to the list. So I will have numbers list, and it is an empty list at the beginning. Right now I have to, for every line, I have to append the current number. So numbers list dot append current number. And if I print that out, I will see that if I start and write, okay, I will have 3 elements, 1, 5, and 9. Not this one, because this isn't going to work. So 3, 1, 5, and 9. We will see that we have a list with 3 items, 1, 5, and 9. Okay, but now we have second part of this problem, which is after all numbers, we will be given one of the following commands. Even, odd, negative, or positive. Okay, if we receive even, we should filter all even numbers, including 0. If we receive odd, we should filter all odd numbers. Negative will be numbers less than 0, and the positive will be numbers greater than or equal to 0, right? Okay, so right now we have to say that after the numbers we will receive a comment. So command is equal to input, because we receive it from the input, right? Okay, and right now we have to check if command is equal to positive or even. If it's equal to even, I have to print all even elements, right? So I have to loop for element in numbers list, and I have to say if the element modulo 2 is equal to 0, I have to print the element, and maybe I have to separate it with a space and stay on the very same line. Cool. Let us try that. Okay, so if I have 3 elements, 1, 2, and 3, I have to say right now even, and I will see that here is something that isn't working, but isn't it? If I check my code, I will see that I have print, and after that I have to print for the whole list. So if I remove that, I will expect from this list 1, 2, and 3 to get just the even number, which is 2, and I will receive 2. Let's see without this line. If I have 3 elements, 1, 2, and 3, and say even, I will get 2. Okay, it is working. Cool. Right now I have to check if the command is odd, else if command, else if in Python is elif, right? So command is equal to odd. I have to do the very same thing, but I will use this for once again, but I will say that if it's not equal to 0, right? this is for the out. And right now, I have to check for, what was it? Oh yes, negative and positive numbers. Okay, so right now I can say, okay, elif comment is equal to negative. I should iterate through this collection, this list, numbers list, and I have to check if the element is less than 0. I have to print this element and stay on the same one, right? But if I have to check if the comment is equal to positive, I have to say the exact same thing here, but right now I have to check if the element is greater than or equal to 0. And if I start, I will try with 3 and no, 4 elements. These 4 elements will be 1, 2, 3, and 4. Right now, I'm going to say even. If I say even, I have to get 2 and 4. Even. It will get me 2 and 4. Okay, right now I'm going to copy these lines and try it once again, but with odd command. Okay, odd 1 and 3. Okay, right now I have to check with positive command. If I paste that and say positive, I will see that all of these are positive. Okay, let us think of something better. Okay, let's think of, let's say 4 elements, but 0, -1, 2, and 6. Here I should get 0, 2, and 6 as positive numbers. Positive. But I have to write positive correctly, right? And if I try again and say positive, I will see that 0, 2, and 6 are here. Okay, very good. And right now, I have to check this one, but with negative. And if it is working, oops, once again, okay, negative, I will see -1. And that's all. We can say that our program is working and we have solved this problem. Okay, and right now we have to do a quick summary, but not just reading these bullets. No, that isn't going to help you. Well, let's imagine that we have an abstract problem, right? Not the numbers, commands, and so on. We have a train, right? And we have carriages. You'll be given a task to count how many people are in the carriage, and print it on the console. Okay, so now how we can achieve that? Okay, so we know that train is a collection of carriages, and every carriage has a count of people, and this will be a count of the people. So we said here that we have a list of numbers where element in the list, the number, is the count of the people in the carriage. Cool? Okay. So right now I can say train list, and I will say that I will get this info from the console, but because here I have a string, right? I have to remove the empty spaces, for example. Dot split by space, by single. And this will give me a list, right? This split function returns a list. Okay, so right now I have the train. And more complicated. From the console I will receive the number of a carriage. I have to print the number of people in it, right? So carriage number, and I will get that from the console, and it will be an integer. So right now, let us imagine this is a train, and here we have carriages, right? And if I say that train list.split is a list of 4 elements, that means that I have rows here, and I have split the string. The string will be something like 4 space 45 space 60 and 9, for example. And right now, when I split by space, I will remove these spaces here, and I will get in this variable a list with 4 elements. The first one is 4, the second one is 45, the third one is 60, and the last one is 9. So I have like indexes in my list 0, 1, 2, and 3. And that's are the number of carriages. So the first carriage is with number 0. The second carriage is with number 1. The third one is with number 2. And the last one is with number 3. So if I receive from the console, for example, carriage number 3, I have to print that I have 9 people in this carriage, right? How can I achieve that? Well, I have just to say print train list with carriages number. But is that going to work? Let us try. If I start and say that I have, once again, 4 carriages, and I say that in the first one there are 8 people, after that space I have 65, after that I have 9, and in the last one I have 1. So, invalid literal for integer with base 10, 8, and this one is coming from another thing. Can you think where is the problem here? So we have value error, invalid literal for integer with base 10. Okay. So right now we saw that we write 4 here, but we should say first the list, and after that we have to say the carriage number. Okay, let's do it once again. I'm going to use these numbers and start it once again. I will paste that and I will say, okay, I want a carriage number of 4. And right now I have an exception, and this exception, you know it already. List index out of range exception. Why? Because if I take this and imagine as a train, here I will have carriages. The first one will be with 0 index, the second one with 1, the third one with 2, and the fourth one with 4. But I'm asking here for a carriage with number 4. This train does not have 4 carriages. It has 4 carriages, but it doesn't have a number of carriage which is 4, right? So I'm out of the range of the train. So this is why I get index out of range exception, train out of range exception. Okay, so now how can I handle that? Well, I have to ask here if len train list, if the numbers of elements here is greater than the carriage number, maybe I will handle the exception. Okay, let's try once again with exactly the same input. But here I have to say else. If it's not, I have to print there isn't a carriage with this number. Okay, so let me try it once again here. Okay, there isn't a carriage with this number. When I started and I say, okay, I want this train with these passengers in it, but I want a carriage with number 2, I will get 9. Well, if I imagine once again here, I will see that I have 0, 1, 2, and 3. And 9 is exactly on index 2. Okay, so right now there is another problem, because here in Python we can say, okay, -1, right? And if I start with this input and say -1, it will return first. But in this special exercise, I do not want to see the carriages from right to left, right? And I don't have this number, -1. So right now I have to add another conditional statement here, which will say that I don't work with negative indexes, right? So right now I can ask another thing. And at the same time, I have to check if this carriage number is greater or equal to 0. If this, I can do that. But if it isn't, I will say that there isn't a carriage with this number, okay? Let me try it once again. And I will say -1, there isn't a carriage with this number. And we're done. Okay? So right now, we have see how we can create a list with this exercise. How we can add and remove elements from the list. We saw this with append and remove function and with pop function, where pop function takes an index and remove function takes an actual object, which means if I have a list from 1, 2, and 4, and I'll give to remove 5, it isn't going to work because I don't have this object here. And it will throw an error, right? Looping through lists, how we can do that with for loop, with range function, or we can achieve that just with 4 element in collection, where collection should be our variable with type of list, right? And how we can access the list elements. And with this problem, we saw how we can do that. And I want you guys right now to think of this lecture like the beginning of something very exciting. Why? Because when you start work with lists very carefully and you know how they're working and how you can, I don't know, take elements from specific index, or how to add elements, or how remove function work, and so on and so on, you are ready to work with lists, not just in Python, but in other languages if you wish so. So lists are the same in every language. They are the same methods, but with different names. So for example, if you want to slice an array in array or list, doesn't matter how you can call this one in Python, because it doesn't matter if it's you're calling this array or list, because it is the same thing. We had just list here. If you want to slice a list in JavaScript, you have to use slice method. Here in Python, I have to use the special syntax with square brackets, right? It is the same in every language. You have to learn the specific things, the abstraction of the lists, and after that you'll be able to work with them not just in Python, but in every other programming language. So give it a shot, and I will see you in the next lecture. Bye.